Measuring angles with radians. Radians are a way to measure angles based on the circumference of a circle with radius 1. So remember that the circumference of a circle is 2 pi r, and in this case the circumference would be 2 pi times 1. So the distance around a circle is 2 pi if the radius is 1, and 2 pi radians is equal to 360 degrees. So if we divide that by 2, we find that pi radians is 180 degrees. And divide that by 2 again, pi over 2 radians is 90 degrees. Divide that by 2 again, pi over 4 radians is 45 degrees. So these are very common things you'll see as you work your way through trigonometry. Now, a good way to look at this is remember that pi is 180 degrees. Look at pi over 2. Pi over 2. Well, remember that pi is 180 degrees, and 180 divided by 2 is 90. Pi over 4 is 180 divided by 4, which is 45. So some other common angles you'll see, pi over 3 radians would be 180 divided by 3, that's 60 degrees. Pi over 6 radians would be 180 divided by 6, that's 30 degrees. These are probably the most common ones you'll see. So there are a couple different ways you can convert using radians. You could use ratios. You could say, all right, I want to know what 120 degrees is in radians. 120 degrees over x equals, well, I know that 180 degrees is equal to pi radians. Remember, 2 pi was all the way around the circle. That's 360 degrees. Pi radians is 180 degrees. So if you cross multiply and solve here, 120 pi equals 180x, and divide by 180, eventually you can figure out that, let's see, this is 12/18 pi divided by 6 would be 2/3 pi. So that is one way to do it. However, that's not the way I like to do it. I think it's easier to convert using a type of conversion we do in physics a lot, which is sometimes called unit canceling. So the way I do this is I take 120 degrees and I multiply by 1. Now when I multiply by 1, it's still going to be 120 degrees. To make a 1, all I need to do is have the top and the bottom be equal things. So I know that pi radians is equal to 180 degrees. The top and the bottom here are equal things, so I'm really multiplying 120 degrees by 1. When I do that, the degrees above cancels with the degrees below, and I end up with 120 pi over 180. And again, that will reduce to 2/3 pi. So 2/3 pi is the answer here. Below, you can do the same kind of thing. 2 pi over 3. Now this is radians, and I'm going to multiply by 1. But the issue is, it's like above. You see how the degrees above, there was a degree above and then a degree below, and the degrees ended up canceling. You can do the same thing here. What I want to do is have the radians cancel. I know that this is radians. So I know that I'm going to put pi radians below and 180 degrees above. And because the radians are above and below, they end up canceling along with the pi, of course. And then I end up with 2/3 of 180 degrees which is 120 degrees. Look at that. So 120 degrees is our answer. Now, a really quick way you can convert when you have radians, if I give you any kind of radians, for example, if I said pi over 2 radians, I know that pi radians is 180 degrees, so that's 180 over 2, which is 90 degrees. If I said 3 pi over 2, well, that's 3 times, remember pi radians is 180 degrees, 3 times 180 over 2, that would be 270 degrees. If I said 3/4 pi radians, that would be 3/4 times, again, pi radians is 180 degrees, and 3 times 180 divided by 4 is 135 degrees. This works really nicely when you're going from radians to degrees. When you go the other direction, though, if I give you an angle like 145 degrees, again, the way to go is to multiply by 1. Since there's a degree above here, I know that I'll put the degrees below here, 180 degrees. That way the degrees above would cancel with the degrees below. And again, pi radians is 180 degrees. And all then I need to do is reduce 145 over 180. Both those are divisible by 5. So I end up with 29 over 36 pi radians. One last example. If I said 240 degrees, make that radians. The degrees are above, so I'm going to put the degrees below to make the degrees cancel. Pi radians is 180 degrees. The degrees cancel out. And 240 over 180 reduces to 4/3. So this would be 4/3 pi radians.